Welcome to the Rob Liefeld Show featuring Robservations. I bring 5 decades experience in the world of comic books and entertainment. I am not some bystander watching the industry go by. I am a full-blown participant, having contributed lasting, memorable works to the world of comic books that have informed the business and the art of this brilliant medium. If it's happening in streaming, in movies, in comic books, in games, we are talking about it, we're discussing it right here. Welcome everybody to another edition of the Rob Liefeld Show featuring Robservations. I'm your host, I'm Rob Liefeld. I'm the guy that's been doing this for, some would say way too long. Got my footprints across 5 decades. Started working in comics in 1986, never looked back. Entering my 41st year, and so glad that you're along with me wherever you're listening, wherever you are enjoying the show, from Spotify, from Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or our YouTube extension. We're just so thankful that you're listening in and that you're participating. And today we have hit a milestone. I mean, it feels like a milestone in our podcasting history. I'm just going to do this real quick. As we hit episode 500 episodes. When I was loading this or sharing it to load a couple weeks back, and I said 498. That means this one's 499 and the next one's 500. So here's what we're going to do. We're not going to have some big, giant special occasion for issue 500. Let me dial down all of your expectations right now. We're going to celebrate kind of what makes this show unique or I'm not going to say special, but unique. Let's stick with unique. The past 5 years and a few months, we have spent most of the time talking about the incredible creators who create the comic books. And so often we go to convention panels. That's why you pack in to see whatever your favorite talent is, especially in the comic book world, the writer, the artist. We want to see we want to hear what went into their process. How did they come up with this sequence or this decision for this character? We want to go along with how they work things out and how they got to a certain point, and maybe tag along for some of the magic, maybe get some inspiration along the way. I love interviews. I love sound bites with my favorite musicians, with my favorite directors. I love hearing James Cameron talk about the third Avatar movie, talking to 60 Minutes and talking in depth about his approach. I love hearing Timothée Chalamet, a young actor who's, just intent on conquering Hollywood and making some really baller moves, some very particular and very specific moves as he aligns himself with specific directors, producers, material. I love watching Don Henley, one of my favorite rock and rollers, I think one of the best voices in the history of rock and roll, wind down and talk for 45 minutes as he did in his special edition of CBS This Morning. You could get online, talk about the music of the Eagles, talk about the inspirations, talk about how he went about writing albums. I bought the book by Cameron Crowe about his experience first as a teenage writer for Rolling Stone, to discover how he went about meeting and greeting and spending so much time with all these rock and rollers that were shaping music as I was coming of age. And there's a chapter in there that talks about that he spent a couple weeks living with Don Henley and with Glenn Frey, who had, shacked up in a house in the canyons in Los Angeles. And as I'm watching Don Henley talk about this and saying the exact same things that Cameron Crowe was saying, except from Cameron Crowe's experience, he was giving it to us as the passenger. And here I'm getting the same stories of how Don Henley would go down at night, go to the different restaurants, write songs on napkins, and then compare and contrast that with what Cameron Crowe was seeing when he was with them, going down to the Troubadour and to Dan Tana's and watching Don Henley write lyrics on napkins. And it's just, I love getting into the process myself. So we're going to have a couple of these shows because there's too much to fit into one. Our 500th show should and could be called Who Said That? Or what'd they say? This is a notables and quotables episode where I'm going to share with you some quotations, some from interviews that we've discussed over the last 6 years. But I'm going to read a quote and give some context and tell you who said it. And maybe as I'm reading it, you can think, who's actually saying this. I've culled together, I think, 7 or 8 quotes that we can kind of focus on throughout the course of the show. Creators are everything to me. Songwriters, producers, directors, the people that craft what we see. Actors are super important. We buy into the emotions and the intensity that they, transmit across on screen, across the airwaves to reach us in our, plushy chairs, our bean bags, or our recliners. But I love the people that build the world that allows those actors to walk in and perform. The world builders. That's what creators are to me. Comic book creators. I'm sad to say 5.5 years in, I still feel like comic book creators are not given the love that they deserve. You're going to hear from Jack Kirby today, and he is still not given the proper credit that he deserves. A lot of it is because he wasn't here. So we have to deal with that. He did not make it. He passed away years, almost a full decade before what we would see, at least 9 years before the biggest of his visions would start to take hold and explode. He had seen some of the cartoons, a lot of the cartoons. He worked on some of the cartoons. He worked on the Fantastic Four cartoon that was on NBC on Saturday mornings when I was growing up, with the Herbie cartoon. He was he saw the Captain America CBS movie, the Doctor Strange, the Spider-Man. He was able to, obviously that stuff is much more adjacent, those last two, to Steve Ditko, but he watched the Marvel Universe, try and reach the critical mass that it eventually would find itself at in pop culture. But when 2000 came along, June 2000, which is about roughly 6 years, 3 months, and when the X-Men came out, then the Marvel aspect, the MCU as we talk about it, on the back of all those Spider-Man movies and all those Fox X-Men movies and some misfires with the Fantastic Four along the way, in 2012, when the Avengers came together and became the signature Kirby Stan Lee, pop culture entree. I believe that at that point, he would have been just completely blown away by what they were able to accomplish at the time. And by that time, he would have been gone just under 18 years. So, well, what do you want done, Rob? Is what you're like. What would you do to have Jack? He'd have a statue in Disneyland. He'd have a statue on the Disney lot. He is as important to what's happened to them as Walt Disney. One of the most Cracker Jack, it's definitely popping like Cracker Jack, quotes that I'm going to share with you. Really, it's not of this week, but it got traction this week. It gained ground this week. It was shared everywhere. It's funny to watch, and I'm gonna jump into it. And it's our friend, our good friend, Todd McFarlane, and he made a video, and he's funny. It's a funny video, and the reason that it resonates with me is I know exactly what Todd's saying. I know exactly what Todd is saying, how he's approaching this. There's our buddy Todd McFarlane right here. I got my iPad. I got it ready to go. There's Big Todd, okay? And he says, I can sell a comic book drawn by Michelangelo and written by my dog, okay? He believes that. because it's true. It Those of us who make the pictures, we've lived through those times, and at no point uh, has it been more clear than in this time of auctions, where pages of Todd's are going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Pages by your host, pages, by many notable artists, illustrators, storytellers of our age are being pursued for sometimes seven figures. The plots, the screenplays, unless you got a Star Wars screenplay, maybe signed by George Lucas, it's not the same. The visuals are what entice, seduce us to reach out, get that particular comic. Again, this spinner rack of my youth, not every rung had a comic I took home. Maybe there was an Archie comic here. Maybe there was a DC Comics I passed by. Maybe there was the casual Marvel comic that I didn't grab. Not every rung of the spinner rack had an item that I pulled off and consumed. Some of them I didn't even peruse. I just wasn't that interested. And I knew the stuff that I immediately connected with. And so much of it was coming out from Marvel at the time, but by the end of the 70s, early 80s, DC was really, making a run and staying in the game, and you could tell that they were coming around the bend and starting to make Marvel sweat, because Marvel had been really uncontested for so long. And this is like the period of maybe just the entirety of the 70s. And I've been doing a ton of research and a lot of reading. And that period is going to go under the microscope a little more with us in the upcoming weeks. But when Todd says this, Todd gets it, and we are artists are very very specific in the language that we use to put down the images that we do. We're very specific. Whether it was Todd, whether it was myself, we knew who was inspiring us, what we wanted to duplicate, the energy we wanted to duplicate. Maybe there was an artist that we really liked, but we didn't like everything that they liked, but we thought we liked a few things that they liked. So we tried to kind of, synthesize all of our different influences into something that we put on the page for you to consume. And it's the way that these characters look, as much as anything else. Somebody tried to tell me that what was Stan Lee's writing, which is why he enjoyed all the Kirby stuff, and why he thought he was so impressed that he hung around and purchased Jack Kirby art. And I said, look, man, when you talk about stories when it comes to Kirby, and you're going to see it gets really gray and gets a little bit more than fuzzy when it gets to the back and forth between who has complete authorship. But when Todd is saying he can sell a book drawn by a master artist that was written by a dog, which is adjacent to not written well, he's not kidding. And when people say, I only buy the story is what keeps me, man, if the art is not grabbing me, I don't buy it. I never have. I buy creators. I buy books for visuals. Newsflash, not every single, so of all the manga, and my family can bear witness over being with me and being cognizant of this stuff for at least the last 10, 12 years. They pick this stuff up. They notice it. You'll never know what they're picking up until they say, like my son in his 20s, after Invincible Season 1 was on, said to me, now I know why there was all those Invincible comics and collections all over our house. Well, of course, yeah, you should have picked one up. You should have tried it out like I asked. They pick stuff up. They've all seen me go to the bookstore and bring home 18 manga editions and sit on the floor with my back up against the couch and spend two and a half hours carefully perusing each page, carefully perusing every page of every manga. But I'm not reading it. And it's occasionally I stop. Oh, I can't believe this shot. I can't believe this sequence. I can't believe this choreography. I can't believe this angle. I haven't read 70% of the manga that I purchase, but I have consumed them visually on a level that is maybe even richer than reading it, because I am about the movement, the motion, the action, the staging, the storytelling, the sequencing. That's what turns me on. And if Todd was wrong when he says, again, let's share the Todd tidbits here. The quote, it's really simple. I can sell you a comic drawn by Michelangelo and written by my dog, he says. It's great. It's a great line read. I'm not going to try and duplicate it. Writers, their primary domain is novels. And writers, most every writer I've ever spoken to is on some level a frustrated artist. They wanted to draw. In the way that they participate in comic books, in the way that they do, is because they love it and they want to participate in it. And the way that they're participating in it is by writing the pages that bring them excitement and teaming with an artist to bring these images to life. Look what Robert Kirkman did with Tony Moore. Look what he did with Corey Walker, later Ryan Otley. I had never heard of any of these guys before, but Robert teamed with all of them to bring a level of excitement that was fresh and new, and I was addicted to it. But I was addicted to it because of those guys' visuals, their art, their storytelling. We live in a world now where people pursue certain covers. There are a couple of cover artists that are the most in-demand guys in the business. Let's go with Scotty Young. Scotty Young is, from my understanding and my money and in my experience, he is the biggest cover artist. You may hear other people get buzzy. Don't believe it for 1 minute. Marvel knows it. Rob Liefeld knows it. If you purchase a Scotty Young cover, and Scotty is somebody who knows his value, and you enter into that, and it is not a cheap endeavor, kudos to Scotty for building up such value in regards to his covers. But if you get one, people are going to come running. They are going to trip over themselves. They're going to want that cover because he has built up a almost 2-decade gallery of images that people just want. They can't lay off of it. They want as much of it as they possibly can. I dare say he has never achieved peak Scotty output. Like, everybody wants more, and they want it all the time because he delivers. He found this niche. You want to call it cartoony, you want to call it cute. It's got this rough edge of a brush, and it has bite to it, and we just can't get enough of it. And they've done merchandise and toys and all manner of items based on his art that brings his covers to life. I have a couple of them. I have some of his Deadpool statues that are based on Scotty Young illustrations. I have to have them. That is because his visual component is so compelling that we cannot let it pass us by. In the early 2000s, it was Alex Ross. Could Alex Ross give you a painted cover? If you did, boom, everyone's in. Everyone's in. Everyone wants that. We can go through a list of different cover artists over different times, but the reason that this exists and the reason that people clamor to get these covers is because they want the image, they want the art. It has nothing to do with story, how many ripped muscles glistening in the sun or in the reflection of the stars your warrior has while he's posing with his giant sword or giant gun. The art matters. It has the edge. You want to kind of be king of the castle with your writing, then go into television, then go into feature films. Writing in those arenas is much more, I think, recognized, heralded, celebrated. But in comic books, it's about the art, and that's all Todd was trying to say. Continuing with our Who Said That? What did they say? Our notables and quotables. I tried to get some good stuff for you guys. I really tried to seek out, I'm going to tell you right now, I mean, so I'm going to go with, you guys guess who said this. I'm going to give you a minute. This is by a celebrated comic book talent. And this quote is, "We run up Marvel's phone bills a lot. My phone bill last month was $900. This is a little adjacent to what happened with Todd and his comment. I can string these things together fairly simply in my mind. I just go, what this comment, and I'm going to read it again. We run up Marvel's phone bills a lot. My phone bill last month was $900. Okay. So this talent is talking about his collaborator that he speaks with. And in the intro that I read to you from Len Wein in the Sal Buscema episode, a few episodes back, we celebrated the life and the contributions of the late great Sal Buscema shortly after he passed. And Len Wein had written a foreword to his IDW Hulk collection book about published, I think, in 2014, 2015. And Len talked about how he would give Sal stories over the phone to draw, and they would discuss, and Sal would take notes and make a whole comic book. Sal then, in his interview in that same book, said Len would be late and he'd get on the phone and he'd call me up and tell me the story, and I would start drawing the story. I know that at one point Todd McFarlane was working like this with Greg Capullo because he told me so. I know that Marv Wolfman would call up George Perez and they would talk over an issue or a sequence, 10 pages at a time, of the Teen Titans. Marv and George would talk it out over the phone. George would then begin penciling it, and then those pages were sent to Marv for him to script and do word balloons, dialogue. There is going to be another example later in these quotes that once again express that in the comic book world, so much of the burden, it's not just put on the artist, it can be put on the artist. The artist is eager to just go, hey, give me the broad spectrums. I'm producing a book called Bad Rock right now. I write for Seth DeMoose, the artist, differently than I would write for myself or write for someone else. I give him kind of broad, basically like 3 to 4 things that I expect to happen on the page, and I leave the sequencing to him. I don't go panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, panel 4. I tell him what I need to happen on that page, and I know that he is as capable a storyteller that he can break it down to his own pleasure, what he wants that page to feel like based on the things that I need, the information that I'm giving him. We ran up Marvel's phone bills. We run up Marvel's phone bills a lot. My phone bill last month was $900. Well, who is this quote attributed to? None other than the greatest X-Men artist of all space and time, the most celebrated run in the history of my lifetime. John Byrne gave that quote in an interview in the Comics Journal in 1980, and he is speaking about the conversations that he was having with Chris Claremont about the X-Men. He goes on to say, and I'm talking to Chris Claremont. We talk out the plots. I put in ideas, It's a real give and take thing. The interviewer says, so you guys work well together? And John says, I think so. The product seems to come out fairly appealing for everyone. We occasionally have our differences. Chris has started comparing us to a marriage of late. That's a big difference we have right there. It says laughter. But I think if we were not working well together, the books would not be as popular as they are. The irony is that 4 months after this interview came out, their run on the X-Men is over. They talk about some friction in here, but just to give you a great idea that a lot of the ways with which the talent was working when there was a traditional writer and a traditional artist. Now John goes on to say how he had to fight to get his name put on as co-plotter. His quote is, blood leaps from a stone compared to Chris Claremont giving me co-plotter credit. I had to break his arm before he gave me co-plotter credit because John really felt like he was shaping the stories. When Jim Lee was doing Wildcats, when I was doing X-Force and Youngblood, when Jim Lee was doing X-Men, when I had another instance of an artist. We kind of draw the plot on the page with our visuals and then hand it to the scripter. Jim Lee had Chris Claremont acting as a scripter. He had John Byrne acting as a scripter. He had Scott Lobdell acting as a scripter. Everyone has it different. If you're going to generate the pictures as the artist, it's different. You then have to kind of do a phone call, do a breakdown. If it's not clear, hey, this is what's going on here. It's pretty clear on the page that X-Force is jumping out of a helicopter. So onto a building. I feel like me even saying that is redundant because it's very obvious on the page, and you can look up those pages. And when Warpath jumps out to tackle Juggernaut, it's right there in the storytelling. It doesn't require a lot. Maybe some motivations then I have to share, or personality, especially of new characters that are coming out. But John Byrne, right there, is giving you an example of how a lot of the sausage is made, how comic books are constructed, especially during that time and place, and maybe even now. Maybe there are times when a writer calls up and says, "Hey, man, what I need is that Batman is going to enter the swamp, and he makes his way through the shrubs and through the thick brush, and then finds himself, thigh deep in the swamp, and he's wading through it, and then there's a disturbance. Turn the page, and then coming up through the disturbance in the swamp, through the muck and the mire, is Swamp Thing, and suddenly he reaches out and starts choking Batman and submerges him in his head as he is plunging him deeper. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. If you tell me that over the phone, if you tell 100 artists that over the phone, they can start drawing that sequence. Sal Buscema said he made the same notes with Len Wein. Later on in this, because I'm gonna continue on this take in terms of quotes and taking. Now that quote again was in the Comics Journal. I can tell you it was in the Comics Journal number 57. We've read from it before. It was $3. It came out in 1980 as the summer special. The very next page, here's another quote. Marv Wolfman is a very sparse plotter, very short, to the point. 2 pages for a 17 stories is the Marv Wolfman plots that I'm working from. Okay? So here's a quote from John Byrne. Marv Wolfman is a very sparse plotter, very short, to the point. 2 pages for a 17-page story is a Marv Wolfman plot. I wasn't able to find it, but John Byrne in the 80s would start doing this for John Romita Jr. John Romita Jr. was giving an interview when he was doing his second run on Iron Man with John Byrne as the writer, no longer with David Michelinie and Bob Layton, but with John Byrne. And I remember reading it maybe in a Marvel Age, but he says John writes on one sheet what the entire comic book is about, and that's all I need, John Romita Jr. says. He draws on one sheet, and honestly, if you think of pages 1 through 5, Iron Man is flying over the Hollywood Hills as he approaches Avengers Mansion, barely missing an oncoming drone, turning around, blasting it from the sky before safely landing on the roof of the villa of the West Coast Avengers. That's 5 pages. Then Iron Man enters the mansion, walks to the subterranean level, and sees Hank Pym working in the gym. You can say that's 2 pages, okay? So when John Romita Jr. described that John Byrne was giving him 1 page, it made me read this in different context. In 1980, maybe 8 years before he's doing the same thing with John Romita Jr., he's saying, Marv Wolfman gives me 2 pages for a 17-page story, okay? Calls him sparse and says he does not go into motivation. And he surmises that because it's the Fantastic Four, we don't need to know what's motivating the Fantastic Four. We know why they're doing what they're doing, is what he goes on to say. But that's an interesting quote. So $900 for him to talk to Claremont and jam on X-Men issues. Then he talks about Marv Wolfman being very different. Now, again, not knowing this, when I would get to know George Perez and sit next to him at shows, he would tell me that sometimes Marv and he would create an issue's worth of content over a phone call, and then George is off to the races. And when they were then sent to Marv, Marv would then put the script on them and polish them off and finish the book. Okay, so here's a quote. I had to share this. Here is a quote, maybe my favorite of all the quotes I'm going to share with you. Neil Adams. So let's put this in context. These are not my words. I am reading them directly. Neil Adams does the worst boobs in the world. Neil draws these great-looking ladies with no breasts. And then it's as if he says, wait, something's missing. Ah, breasts. And it's like, how can a guy who's that good draw such lousy breasts? People, if you're thinking that this is also attributed to John Byrne in this 1980 Comics Journal interview, you're right. That this is a crazy statement. It's an entire section on how women are depicted in comic books. The one thing that stood out to me was the female interviewer, Gretchen, asks John, why are the girls in comic books so ... healthy? And John Byrne says, because the guys are too. Does that bother you? There is I hadn't seen it for years, but there's a clip of me on a talk show where they ask me why the women are so exaggerated. And I also feel that it should be pointed out that all the guys that we are drawing have broad chests, beautiful, broad built shoulders, and giant biceps and triceps. And the men have tiny waists. All my men had tight buttocks, okay? They got some tight cheeks, thick thighs. I mean, it is such a, look, I just immediately understood John Byrne's reaction, and we couldn't be more different, but him saying, because the men are also so healthy and fit. But the one side is often given a certain amount of attention while the other one is starved out. We don't, the fact that the men that we depict are in fact so buffed, so ripped, so equally as healthy. But so during the context of this, he says this Neil Adams quote that is not quote. He makes this comment about Neil Adams that is just crazy, and I'm not going to touch it. Okay, I'm just going to tell you it exists, and this is the great thing about this time with these talents. You put anything in front of them, a microphone, any microphone, and they're just going to talk because they want you to know their process. They want you to come inside their head and see how they think. Here's a quote I want to share with you, and it's going to be obvious because I'm going to have to put the characters are talking about in the quote. Some of the quotes I'm sharing with you today are informative. Some of them are bombastic, like the one I just shared. Some of them are insight into maybe the moment in time that creator is speaking and what they're going through. Some of them are sad. I'm going to put this one as sad. My understanding, this quote says, my understanding is that when the work is finished, I'm not going to say the name, the work is finished, and DC has not used the characters for 1 year, they'll be ours. The full quote, my understanding is that when Watchmen is finished and DC have not used the characters for a year, they're ours. And he goes back and he expands on that by saying, if DC doesn't do anything with them after 1 year, we've got them and we can do whatever we want with them. We all know that is not how it turned out. And Alan Moore, context here, this is a quote from a UK Comic Con in 1987. On the panel are Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, and Dave Gibbons. Neil interviews both of them briefly. Neil is not yet Sandman Neil Gaiman yet, okay? And then he opens it up to the audience. And the audience is the one that asks Alan, do you actually own the Watchmen? To which he says, my understanding is that when Watchmen is finished and DC have not used the characters for a year, they're ours. And then he goes more into it in another comment that plays back and forth that says, if DC hasn't done anything with them after 1 year, we've got them and can do whatever we want. We know that that's not how that turned out. I believe they both believe this, but what happened was that Paul Levitz and Jeanette Kahn, who were running DC Comics at the time, realized we can just keep issuing new publications, new printings of this book every year on the dot. I don't care if it's the 15th, the 16th, the 17th printing. Collect them, reissue them, hardcover, omnibus size, these absolute editions that they did in the early 2000s. I mean, they all throughout the 90s never let it lapse. They always went back to press exactly contractually when they were supposed to, so that they would not be giving up the rights to the Watchmen, that they would not revert to Alan and Dave Gibbons. So this hope that we're using DC as a launch pad to tell this one very specific arc. I don't know. You guys will be able to tell me. I was trying to really kind of get a clear picture as I was doing this, and you're like, Rob, you didn't just decide to Google it. I think honestly, I just didn't want to know the answer to this. Dave Gibbons says what would actually be horrendous, and at this point DC could legally do it, would be Rorschach teaming up with Batman. I have enough faith in DC, and I don't think that they'll do that. I think that because this is a unique team, that they couldn't get anyone else to do it after Watchmen 2. And we have no plans to ever do Watchmen 2, Dave Gibbons says. So the idea that he's squirming about don't team Batman and Rorschach up, don't have them interact with, I'm not, again, I'm fuzzy on whether that did happen. We all know that before Watchmen and sequels and prequels galore were greenlit, I think 2013, 2015, 2014, that was one of DiDio's big thing. He was the guy who would finally pull the trigger and just go and exploit Watchmen on the largest stage possible as much as he possibly could. And so that quote is a little sad because the eagerness and the this is Alan before the industry semi beats him down, okay? Alan's a little perkier here. He's a little more excited. One thing that I thought was very interesting later on in the interview, I'm going to give you a quote. Says, look, talking about what they're going to do next. I'm going to write and draw this project myself. It's based on the Bible. And it will be my adaptation of a piece from the Old Testament. I've also been approached by people who are doing a modern horror anthology. But he talks about Dave Gibbons is going to write and draw an adaptation from the Old Testament. Now, to my knowledge, we never got this. But these boys had some plans post-Watchmen, and that one really shook me. Huge Bible guy, huge Old Testament guy, love those characters, love those stories. Thought that was interesting, and we definitely missed out on that. Okay, so this is an interesting quote. I'm going to pivot right in here. Okay. Oh, this is so good. This is great. Do you think this is so? There's a question being asked on our next quote, as you can play along. Do you think you've achieved a sort of perfection in your work? Do you think you've achieved a sort of perfection in your own work? Is the question. The answer that this person says is yes. I achieved perfection, my type of perfection. Visual storytelling. Storytelling was my style. I was an artist, but not a self-proclaimed great artist, just a common man working in a form of art which is now universal. I get letters from people about my own status. Let me give it to you again. Did you think that you achieved a sort of perfection in your work? Yes, I did. I achieved perfection is the full quote. My type of perfection. Visual storytelling. Storytelling was my style. I was an artist, but not a self-proclaimed great artist. Just a common man who was working in a form of art which is now universal. I get letters from people of my own status, okay? That, ladies and gentlemen, is another gem from the Comics Journal, 1990, issue 134. And that interview from which we get this amazing quote is from the genius, the greatest that ever touched the comic book page. That is Jack Kirby answering in the affirmative. Yes, I have achieved perfection. Yes, comma, I did. I've achieved perfection. My type of perfection. Visual storytelling. Storytelling was my style. I was an artist, but not a self-proclaimed great artist, just a common man who was working in a form of art which is now universal. I get letters from people of my own status. The interviewer, Gary Groth, says, "Did you teach yourself to draw?" And he says, "I taught myself to draw. And I soon found out what I really wanted to do. I didn't think I was going to create any great masterpieces like Rembrandt. I thought comics were a common form of art and strictly American in my estimation because America was the home of the common man. And show me the common man that can't do a comic. So comic books is an American form of art that anyone can do with a pencil and a paper. And God bless you, Jack Kirby, for that absolute truth bomb." He says, Gary Groth says, "How did you teach yourself to draw? Did you use books?" Jack says, "I used any method I could." "Did you go outside and sketch from life?" Gary Groth asks. "I'm trying to find how you actually learned to draw, how you learned anatomy." Jack says, "My anatomy is self-taught. I feel everybody has that ability. I draw instinctively. Mine was an instinctive style." "Did you take any formal art training?" "No. I tell young people that it is an advantage to study art." "Did you learn anatomy, where the muscles are, how they connect, so on?" Jack says, "I searched it out. I made my own muscles. I made my own figures as powerful as I could make them." Jack Kirby is just spitting bullets in this interview. It is lengthy, it is detailed, and he goes to great lengths with great confidence to share with you his process. You got to understand, this guy generally never did less than 3 issues of comics, whether that was 3 17-page issues with a cover, whether that was 3 20-page issues with a cover. Jack was prolific. I asked him to his face, "How'd you do it, Jack?" when I was at his house in 1993. He said, I had bills to pay. I had to provide for my family." He was just as sweet and as succinct and in just the most of just the purest clarity. Basically, I had to draw 3 pages a day, he told me, to pay the bills, to take care of my family, to provide. They had moved to Thousand Oaks. They had Jack's house in the hills was beautiful. Honored to have visited it multiple times. Dined with Jack, as I've said. I say it over and over again because Jim Valentino, when he did that interview with us, he revealed to all of us that he didn't go visit the Kirbys either. And it is stunning to me that none of the guys, because over time, and especially when Jack passed, there was great regret among all of them for not spending more time with him. And Jack, going back to what I mentioned about 30 some minutes ago about the guy that said, "I only like the Stanley stories." No, if you were digging that stuff, it's because of the world that Jack drew you into, whether it was the grandeur of Galactus, the spectacle of Latveria, the menace of Doctor Doom. We talk about staging, storytelling, character design, costume design. I told a guy the other day, I could definitely have given you a character called Deadpool, and in my head as I'm answering this guy, and given you a costume that makes damn certain Deadpool never pops. Because see, this my boy right here, I've done an entire episode on visuals. I was 9 years old when the steam, and the smoke clears, and this dark black armored samurai comes up in black armor, and he breathes deeply, and I'm like, "Who's this guy?" We would all come to know him as Darth Vader. Immediate reaction to a visual, Boba Fett. Who's this guy? How many proof of purchases do I have to cut off my toy? Because that's what was necessary to mail it in to get that action figure to arrive in my mailbox. And it did. It came. I still remember running home, okay, from the 6th grade. Every day opening, nothing. Then one day, everyone sees it this way. All of my homies. I can picture young Dave Mandel doing the same thing. Open in the mailbox, and you feel the glow as you see this peculiar, it looked like a white box that could have had toothpaste in it. And you slipped it out, and there, wrapped in plastic, was your Boba Fett. There was Boba Fett. It existed. It wasn't a lie. You could send in. I had sent in for a lot of stuff in the ads of comic books. The army men, the Revolutionary War guys. Never got them. This one came. Sent him to Kenner, cut him up, boom. Visually, I didn't know what Boba Fett sounded like. I didn't know what he was going to do. I just knew he looked awesome, and I needed to know more about him and play with him and pit him against all the action figures in my Star Wars collection. Darth Vader, Darth Maul, Boba Fett, the Star Wars universe is full of them. Mace Windu, coolest Sam Jackson ever looked, okay? Snake Eyes, instant. Spider-Man, boom, boom. Love him, gotta go. Jack Kirby gave you visuals. I could have made Deadpool. I could have given him the worst costume and colored him up in green and yellow, and you don't ever care from him. You don't send as much mail as you did on him. And Deadpool is a character that never, ever took flight, okay? Visuals matter, staging matters, introduction matters, and Jack did all of those so perfectly, so amazingly. He did it again and again and again and again. Wakanda, Black Panther. New Genesis, the New Gods. Apocalypse, Darkseid. Latveria, Doctor Doom. You know, Asgard, Thor, his version. And he talks about it in here. We're going to stay on Jack Kirby for a second. I created, again, did you achieve perfection? I did. Dig it. Roz Kirby, who is unheralded, is sitting next to him during this entire conversation. And they're conversing back and forth. They talk about meeting Stan Lee. He didn't like Stan. And he said, here's a pull quote, Jack Kirby. I'm just going to tell you who's saying it. You can already figure it out. Gary Groth wants to know how Jack came up with the Fantastic Four, and he says, well, Stan says he came up with the Fantastic Four. Jack Kirby says, and Roz Kirby says, Jack, he wants you to tell him how you created the Fantastic Four, because Jack needs some focus here. Gary says, did you approach Marvel, or Jack cuts him off? He says, it came about very simply, and I'm when I tell you what the pull quote is, it came about very simply. I came into the Marvel offices and they were taking out the furniture. They were removing desks. And I'm thinking, I need this work. I had a family and I had a house. He's not in California yet. This is when in the 60s, Jack is living in New York, living on the East Coast. He says, I had a family, I had a house, and all of a sudden Marvel is coming apart. And there was Stan Lee sitting in a chair crying, Jack says. He didn't know what to do. He's sitting in a chair crying. I told him, stop crying. This is the best. Go in to Martin Goodman and tell him to stop moving the furniture out. I will see that the books make money, Jack says. He says, I came up with a raft of new books, and all these books began to make money. Somehow they had faith in me. I knew I could do it. I could come up with fresh characters that nobody had ever seen before. I came up with the Fantastic Four. I came up with Thor. Whatever it took to sell a book, I came up with. Stan Lee has never been editorial-minded. It wasn't possible for a man like Stan to come up with new things, or old things for that matter. Stan wasn't the guy that read or told stories. Stan was a guy that knew where the papers were, or knew who was coming to visit on the schedule that day. Stan Lee is essentially an office worker, okay? I'm essentially something else. I'm the storyteller. My job is to sell comic books, sell stories. When I saw this happening at Marvel, I stopped the whole damn bunch. I stopped them from moving the furniture. Stan Lee was sitting on a stool, and he was crying. Gary Groth says, did the success of Justice League at National, DC Comics, have anything to do with you creating Fantastic Four? Jack says, no, it didn't prompt me. I felt the urgency. It was an instinct. Here you have an emergency situation. What are you going to do? The water is pouring in through a big hole in the wall. You don't stop it putting adhesive bandages around the wall and shoring it up. You get a lot of stuff together and you slam it against the wall and you keep the water out, and that's what I did. Who came up with the name Fantastic Four? I did. I've been coming up with all these names. I came up with Thor because I'm a huge history buff. I know all about Thor and Balder and Mjolnir. Nobody ever bothered with that stuff except me. Jack did have earlier depictions of Thor in his work during the time he was working with Joe Simon. A lot of the context for this is when they went to work for Martin Goodman in what was going to become Marvel Comics. Joe Simon and Jack came into the office, and Jack talked about that Stan Lee was a kid who bothered him. He would stand over his shoulders, ask questions, or tell them they were late. He said he just didn't know how to be anything other than a bother. That I didn't clip, but it's fresh. I had shared it. And so when it says he arrived one day and they were cleaning it out because they were going to shut it down, this is Jack in his own words. Comics Journal, of course, put the pull quote, Stan Lee was sitting in a corner crying. This is Jack's version. They ran Jack's version. Of course, Stan's going to have a different version. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is Jack Kirby. When Jack left in the 70s to go to DC, he said, "Can you clarify?" Gary Gross says, "Can you clarify why you left?" Because this is going to come up in a future episode. I can't wait to share this with you. But Gary Groth, who was running Fantagraphics, who published, among other things, the Comics Journal, which was a buzzy comic book magazine, he said, "When you say you have difficult with Marvel, what do you mean by that?" Jack says, "I'll clarify it by saying I'm a man. I'm a guy from the East Side. I'm basically a guy who likes to be a man. And if you try to deprive me of it, I can't live. That's what the industry was going to do to me. And I had a gut full of it. I couldn't do anything less. I had to get myself as far away." Carmen at DC, Carmen Infantino, was nice to me. I wasn't having a great time. He was an artist. He was an artist who didn't know how to be an editor or a publisher. It was his first joust with this responsibility. And Roz Kirby interrupts and says, "But he gave you the opportunity to do your own work." And Jack said, "Yes, he gave me the opportunity to do the New Gods." And that was a blessing to me because I got off on another course and New Gods made money for DC Comics. And Roz weighs in. Jack had complete control over the writing. He picked his own inker. He could do anything he wanted. Jack said, "Yeah, I moved to California and nobody bothered me here. I did the New Gods as I saw them. I did the New Gods as I felt it should be done." And here's why I'm reading this to you. Gary Gross says, was it a tough decision to leave Marvel Comics? And Roz immediately interrupts and says, "No, because he was making more money. They offered him a lot more money." Kirby says DC was heaven because I was an individual there. I was able to do something under my own name. If I wrote Jack Kirby, then I wrote it. If I drew Jack Kirby, then I drew it. And the truth was I was beginning to write and draw and have a sense of freedom. So when Roz says, because they paid more money, look, no one gets into comics to be rich, but at some point, all of us in the business, we just want to know that we're going to be taken care of. And what Roz is saying there is they were respecting him by giving him a bigger page rate and paying him more money. I mean, she just cuts it right off. Was it a difficult decision? No, because he made more money. They offered him more money. Wives are powerful. Wives are very much a part of relationships, girlfriends, but wives that I have known, and Roz was the toughest of all the tough cookies. And if you knew them when I met them in the late 80s and saw them, whether they were at shows or I was at their house or I was at a restaurant with them, they were a pair. When he would go and do a show, I told you I did a panel with Jack, and Mike Mignola and I were on either side of him at an LA show in 1990. And maybe it was 1991. It was the week New Mutants 100 came out. We couldn't speak. We were so in awe. Jack was in the middle, but Roz was in the front row smiling at Jack the entire time he spoke. They were simpatico. They were a couple. I'm going to give you one more quote in my day of quotes. We've given you John Byrne. We've given you Alan Moore. We've given you Dave Gibbons. I gave you some great Jack Kirby to chew on. But I'm going to end with this. Oh, man. I told you, some of these are sad quotes. Some of these are, a little bit cruel. This quote is, "It's kind of difficult to put into words why I don't like Bob Layton's inking. This is going to sound really silly, but I actually feel physically ill when I look at Bob Layton's work. I really do. It's like everything is greasy and slimy. I just read to you, word for word, what was spoken. Let me tell you something. My generation, the Bronze Age kids, Bob Layton was arguably our number two, sometimes number one inker. If he inked George Perez, it looked great. When he inked John Byrne, as he did in a Hulk annual and two Ant-Man spotlight issues of Marvel Premiere, we loved it. We ate it up. His work over John Romita Jr. on Iron Man is seminal work. It's the reason Iron Man broke out on his own in the way that he did, and it's largely the work that was being adapted in the first three Iron Man movies with Jon Favreau. Is it Shane Black? Yeah. Bob penciled and inked his own work. We always bought it up. He did Hercules. But whoever Bob inked, and he inked over at DC, I was a huge fan. He was maybe a little more heavy-handed, but a really slick finisher. The right after Terry Austin, the slickest lines that you could possibly encounter were the ones that Bob Layton gave you. Bob Layton inked John Buscema on covers of Conan that I drooled over. Like I said, he inked everybody I liked. So to fandom, we dug him. And there was a Hulk annual that they did together. John Byrne illustrated, and I think Roger Stern drew it. Don't hold me to that. Bob Layton inked it, and it was many of ours, and to this day remains one of our favorites. If I could obtain pages from that book, I would flip out. The Ant-Man issues, if I could obtain pages, it's some of my favorite Byrne work, inked by Bob Layton. This is John Byrne, of course, making this quote. The inker said, "You don't like Bob Layton's inking, did you?" He totally prompts him. He says, "It's kind of difficult to put into words why I don't like Bob Layton's inking. This is going to sound really silly, but I feel actually physically ill when I look at Bob's work. I really do. It's like everything is greasy and slimy." John is at the peak of his powers here. Microphone in front of him. We've talked about this before. It was worth revisiting on our 500th episode, how he would just body people, just body them with these. The question above is when he's talking about his favorite inkers. And he says, "Most of my favorite inkers I've never been inked by. Tom Palmer is my favorite inker of all time, and the only thing Tom Palmer has inked of mine is a cover I did for Marvel Team Up with Thor. I own that cover. I own that original art. I'm proud to say." He doesn't think that cover even looks like Tom Palmer inking him. Interesting. Then he pivots towards this answer about Bob Layton. But people, we're going to do the quotables, the notables, the who said that? Who's saying that? Okay? What did they say? These are going to be the names of these as we share them. Today you got Alan Moore, you got Dave Gibbons, you got John Byrne talking about Neil Adams, talking about Marv Wolfman, talking about Chris Claremont, talking about Marvel Painter for the Phone Bill, talking about Bob Layton. You got Jack Kirby talking about his work at Marvel, and Jack Kirby talking about his relationship with Stan Lee and how Jack feels about his own work. When you get into the quotes and you get into the sound bites, I feel like we get a glimpse inside these people, into their thought process, into their into what makes them tick. And I, for one, am always here for it. I dig it. I love it. I love the glimpses into the psyche of some of my favorite artists, some of my favorite creators. And I'm going to continue to share that with you guys as we continue to make Robservations episodes, because there are so many quotes. Quotes that'll be coming your way in the future will be attributed to everybody in the business. The Howard Chaykins, the Frank Millers, okay? Maybe we'll go get Bob Layton quotes and contrast them. But that is what I wanted to do. You know, you're going to throw a party. You're going to celebrate 500 issues. No, I'm not going to give you some giant interview. You guys who are all like, will you interview Todd McFarlane? I'm not sure there's enough bandwidth for a Todd McFarlane interview. I'm not sure you have a couple weeks of your life to get the two of us to talk. So yeah, sorry that didn't happen. But this was my 500th episode. You guys have been on this crazy ride with me. I appreciate you so much. Thanks for, as always, listening and spreading the love of the show. And today I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into all of these. Those Jack Kirby quotes are from 1990. The John Byrne are from 80. The Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons stuff is from 87. So we try to dance around, give you kind of a sample size. And we kicked off with the Todd McFarlane quote that was making the rounds this week. That's just a couple, maybe a year or so old. Todd believes it. He wouldn't say it if he didn't believe it. And I believe it because comic books are about the art. Everybody, when I'm not on this show, hanging with you, you guys know I'm all over social media. I'm on X at Robert Liefeld, RobertLiefeld. RobertLiefeld. Man, that's a mouthful. Blue check tells you it's really me. I'm looking at your comments, your replies, your all your interaction, your DMs. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thanks for the back and forth and for sharing love of sports and pop culture and movies and television and books and comics. I just love the connectivity that we've been able to experience with social media. I think it's so much fun, and I think it's more than enhanced our lives than harmed it. Maybe there's too much information being shared. I'm trying to not share too much anymore. Maybe I did at one point, but I've been pretty scarce in that department. But I do let my excitement travel over there, and I can feel your excitement as well. At Robert Liefeld, blue check, signifying it is really me over on X. On Instagram, thank you for digging all the crazy, bits and pieces and things and video that we're sharing over on Instagram. At Rob Liefeld, RoBLiefeld, blue check, says it's really me. That is me that you are interacting with. I'm commenting, sometimes going back and forth with you guys. You guys think I have some bad takes. Man, I think some of you have some of the worst takes. And some of you guys are only into comics in the last decade, and it shows. It just does. You don't have the depth to understand where people, fans of my age, we understood something that was important that was shared with us in terms of a hero's limitations or their capabilities. But man, they're just rewriting stuff all the time, and in video games and in movies and in television. How do you measure it? It's super fun. Instagram at Rob Liefeld, just enjoying all of the different ways that we're interacting over there, and we're going to keep coming at you. You're going to get exclusive glimpses of my art and my work in all many shapes and forms earlier than you're going to get anywhere else when you follow me over there on Instagram. On TikTok, got the check. I'm real over there too. Real Rob Liefeld is my handle at TikTok. Come join me, giving you, the same level of interactivity, juice, connectivity, talking. So many of you guys have reached out. I'm meeting so many new people over on TikTok. It's a fresh playground for me. I love hanging with you guys. Follow me, Real Rob Liefeld on TikTok, Rob Liefeld on Instagram, Robert Liefeld on X. I have a group on Facebook. It's called Rob Liefeld Marvel Extreme and Beyond. Come join us. We have great art, great discussions. Every episode of this issue, every episode of this show gets a dedicated post with which you can engage, discuss what you've heard with other like-minded people or not like-minded who will give you a different opinion on the subject matter. But we would love to have you join us. Rob Liefeld, Marvel Extreme and Beyond is my group. It's on Facebook. Myself or a gentleman named Terry Sala, Sala, will click you on through. Good vibes, no trolling. We keep it up with people. We have fun. We like comics. We love comics. It's a group version of this show. We just are having fun, and we love what we love, and we'd love to have you join us. I'm doing live streams like crazy, because that's a marketplace, a place that I can reach you directly, because I'm not going to be in Indiana, in Chicago, in Seattle. I'm not going to be in Orlando. I just don't have time. I'm doing way too much work. I have to stay here at this desk doing all this work to make all these deadlines, to get this stuff out. And so one way that I can connect with you is through my live stream components, whether it's on eBay, which we're going to be doing a whole lot more of this year, or on Whatnot. Get the Whatnot app, download it, follow Rob Liefeld. What you're going to get is fresh. So this holofoil Youngblood 4 cover is not a cover you're ever going to see in the direct market. This is only available via my live stream. Okay, I'm gonna hold this up. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna give you the way that holofoil. This cover in and of itself, this specific image of Chapel in Youngblood number 4, this entire cover is only available for people who interact with me online live stream. This doesn't go to your stores. This only goes to me. We have a rating, a 5-star rating for a reason. We've been doing this for over 3 years. Sometimes I look and we have a 1 day shipping average. Okay, so here's a virgin version of that. You got the hollow foil, you got the trade dress. These are both different versions, but the bottom line is, in the case of these, what we call collector's editions of certain issues, the Youngblood issues, you're going to get that on average 3 weeks before it hits the stores. It's in hands now. This isn't in your stores till Monday, but it's going to come with a signed component from me, and it's an original cover that you're not going to get anywhere else. That's the kind of stuff we're doing. That's the kind of stuff that we're sharing. If I had something with like one of my signatures, I'd share that with you too. But like this Thundercats cover, okay? This exclusive from a couple years back is again RobLiefeldCreations.com. Always visit RobLiefeldCreations.com, my website. There's going to be new stuff there that's available first before the live stream as well. But get on Whatnot, follow Rob Liefeld. This Evangeline edition, only this Evangeline edition, only on live stream, only on live stream. These there's a little RL initial there, Rob Liefeld RL initials. Again, this is the kind of stuff we try and keep it super fresh and give you guys exclusives that you're going to get nowhere else. Man, did I slur that? Give you guys exclusives, okay? That's what you're going to get from us. So check out Whatnot. Follow us. If you follow me on Instagram or on TikTok, you'll see my links on eBay, and we would love to have you join us. As always, as we wrap up, just want to reach out. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing as best as you possibly can, that your mental, your physical, your emotional, and your spiritual well-being are exactly where they need to be. Life is going to go out of its way to pound you down. They're going to push you to your limits, your job, relationships, responsibilities, and sometimes you're just going to want to scream. Get off the treadmill, step away from the grind, take a deep breath, go out, get some me time, read that comic book you've been putting off, watch that streaming show, catch up on that movie, go out, get coffee with your friend, go to the diner like Joy and I did the other night. We wanted eggs. Well, who has great breakfasts at 8:30 at night? Denny's does. Brand new Denny's in our town. And boy, it was delicious. And it just takes you away. Go for a long walk. Sun's setting lighter, guys. We're entering spring. This is go time, okay? The cold is getting behind us. I know it's not completely there yet, and I know I'm privileged to live in Southern California, and we don't have as bad as the rest of us. I'm aware. Get that ice cream cone. Get that hot fudge sundae. Get those pancakes, okay? I already had my Reese's Big Cup right before we came on the air, which explains some of my chocolato energy that I brought today. Some chocolate and peanut butter rolled all up in the one, and boom. And if you cut this vein, open me up right here, I'm chocolate and peanut butter, and this one I'm potato chips. Hey, 58, feeling great. Hope you're doing good. 2 fist bumps into this Blue Yeti mic. Wishing you all the best. Don't leave me here. I'll be right there, right on that curb right there. Come by, get me. I'll jump in. We will most definitely, absolutely, inevitably, we're going to talk again real soon.